Welcome to Behind the Doors, the podcast where we take you behind the scenes of residential real estate investing. I'm your host, Dan Noma Jr., here with my co-host, Marvin Cruz.
We're here to help you unlock the best strategies and practice for investors. Whether you're just starting out or you're a seasoned pro looking to scale your portfolio.
We've spent decades navigating the ever-changing world of real estate, and now we're sharing everything we've learned to help you succeed.
From off-market deals to cash flow management and everything in between, we'll break it down and bring you actionable insights that can make a real difference in your investments.
So get ready to open the door to new opportunities and take your real estate investing to the next level. Let's dive in.
Hey, what's up, Dan?
What's up, man?
Oh, man, I'm doing
back at it.
Oh, we are back at it. I am doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, man.
Good, buddy. You know, sometimes I got to check in with you, make sure you're doing good.
I know.
You're
I'm
so
good,
busy.
I know. This week was crazy.
You're the busiest guy I know, I think.
I know. This week was crazy. I don't know what happened. Sometimes it's like there are a couple of days where I could sit there and I'll get emails and I'm working those, whatever. But
yeah.
Then I have weeks where I just have back-to-back meetings and then I have no time to actually work. Yeah. And that's what drives me crazy.
You're so busy, but you always think back, what did I do today?
Yeah.
But you know what? Last episode, we talked about finding the right contractor.
Yep.
And there's another segment, if you will, to flipping houses. Mm-hmm. And guess what we got to get correct? We got to get this thing called ARV, after rehab value. And so I want investors to really understand, one, what is ARV? Why does it matter? And why do you have to get this correct? So, Dan, first and foremost, what is ARV?
Yeah. In its simplest form, right? It's the value of a property after the renovation's completed.
That's right.
Right. So I buy the property today, I renovate it, and then it's the value of the property after I've renovated it.
Yep.
And it works on both a long-term hold strategy and the fix and flip. In both scenarios, it's important. It's probably more important on the fix and flip side.
Okay.
And that's where I see most of the misses on this is an investor isn't super clear on what their after rehab value is and how important it is to know that number and then know what it actually means. And hopefully we'll get into all of that.
Yeah. Why does it matter?
Well, it matters because it's setting up a couple of things. Well, first thing that it sets is is this a good investment or a bad investment? Can I make enough money on this opportunity to even do this deal? We got to know that. But then it also sets up your renovation budget, right? It's because here's the deal. You could buy a property, let's say, for example, we've established that the high water mark or the highest comp in the neighborhood, fully renovated property, really nice job, was going to sell for $200,000, right? And I'm buying this property for $100,000.
Right.
So I'm looking at the difference. What I need to now know as an investor is if I'm using that number as my ARV. So if I'm saying, okay, this really nice comp that I've got that sold for $200,000 is the ARV that I'm going to use. So my future value of this property, I want it to be $200,000. Then in my renovation, I've got to make sure that my budget includes all of the things that made that property worth $200,000 to that buyer. Right? If I skimp on stuff, I have to assume that number is going to be less than that $200,000, right? Or if I go above and beyond, what can I do to maybe even reach further beyond? What did they miss that I could do to push the value beyond that number?
Yeah.
So it's not an easy number, right? There's nothing easy about determining an ARV, and it's almost like an art as you learn how to do it. But when you do it, it becomes so critical in your game. And you've heard me harping on our analyst team about this number. It's because it sets up the whole thing, right? It sets up the future value. It sets up the renovation budget. All of those things are so critical as part of this investment. We can't miss on this. You've got to be dialed in on this ARV.
Yeah, it sounds like it's ultimately it's ultimately the cornerstone of flipping at the end of the day, right? Because it's going to set your budget, and you could get this wrong. Yeah. Oh, this could hurt. This could really hurt. So, what are some common ARV mistakes that you're seeing out there that folks are making?
Yeah, I see guys let's say, for example, they're looking at comparable sales, but they're not looking at comparable sales with like the same, under the same size or in the same subdivision or the same quality of home. Like we live in Phoenix, and here it's easier to come up with an ARV than it is in, say, like Atlanta. Right. And the reason that is because the homes in our subdivisions, like there might be 200 or 300 homes in a subdivision, and you're likely to find a comparable sale that you could use for your ARV number within that subdivision. So now you know, same builder, same like amenities in the subdivision, same quality of construction, same like, you know, all the, like the more commonalities I can get of that asset, the better for determining my ARV. But we get to a market like Atlanta, it's not like that, right? Every home is different.
Right.
They're all little custom homes, right? I mean, they do have pockets of different, you know, tract homes and stuff like that. But, you know, they're more unique in that way. And so now you're getting into, okay, you know, square footage, lot square footage. Is it a single level or a 2 level, right? Does it have a basement, crawl space? Does it have a pool, right? Where is the location of like the school? Is it far away? Is it, you know, what's the demographics of the area? Like, you know, am I actually comparing it apples to apples?
Oh man.
And I think that's where real estate investors get sideways is like, you know, because you could go like, you've seen it where you go drive out of a neighborhood, the neighborhood next door looks totally different. So if you're like getting on a map and you're going, okay, I'm going to look at a 1 mile radius of my subject property and I'm going to look for comparables, I'm going to probably pull in some comps from a neighborhood that isn't like mine. It's possible.
Yep.
And I got to be really careful that I don't do that because the two are not the same, you know, and therefore I can't use those comparable numbers in that case. And so I think like the big one is like setting up, you know, your comps and running your comparable sales becomes like so critical.
That is everything.
And we've talked about 100 times. It's the data, right? Like if you're going on Zillow and that's your like data set, know that you're only getting like a section of the market. You're not seeing the whole market when you do that. So be super careful of that. Like, you know, make sure where you're getting your data has a full set of data and continues to strive to drive more because like you can get everything. You got it. And if you're not, you're missing something. And that could be the one that throws your whole deal off.
You know, there's a lot of savvy flippers that will follow a 70% rule, right? In order to stay profitable. And so this is their purchase price plus rehab costs should be no more than 70% of ARV. Do you follow the 70% rule?
I mean, I have a model, right? And I've built my own model in our system that allows me to look at a deal. And I don't know that it's like at 70%. It might be a little bit different just because my expense load assumptions are different. But I don't think it's a bad way to look at them. I don't think that's a wrong way to look at them. That 70% rule has been around as like, you know, since the earth cooled. I mean, it's an old way to look at them. And it works, you know, so it works. Where you might run into challenges, right, is just like if your ARV is off, then 70% of what? You know what I mean? So like
70% of the wrong number.
70% of the wrong number is still the wrong number. So don't let that ARV number be off, right? So I'm less worried about like 70%. What I'm more worried about is like, let's nail the ARV, get that right first. Then we can back into getting the correct purchase price number, acquisition number.
And let's talk about that because you mentioned earlier data is so important. You can't guess at this one.
No.
You cannot guess at this one. So let's talk about how do we get the accurate ARV number? What are some of the things that we could do? How do we run comparable sales comps, if you will?
So like, you know, I like to think of this like the way that an appraiser thinks about, you know, valuing a property. And, you know, we could get really technical here. So I'm just going to like not get too deep into this, but I think that like the first thing I start with is the location, right? And, you know, like I said earlier, the subdivision, if I can find comparable homes within the subdivision and I have enough comparables in there, I'm going to stick within that subdivision, right? If I've got to go outside the subdivision, right, I will go no more than a mile and I will say, okay, like, but is that neighborhood the same as mine? Does it have the same amenities as mine? Is it better? If it's better, okay, what can I do in my neighborhood maybe to discount it a little bit so that I can use that as a comparable? But I've just got to make sure that I've got, you know, I'm comparing things apples to apples. Then I get into, now I've got a comp set and I could have 20, 30 properties in that set. then I could start to nail it down and go, okay, what about size? Like, is it the similar size to mine? What about the condition, right? Was it just like lived in and they'd done some remodeling themselves? Or was it like renovated by a professional?
Yep.
When was the renovation done? Was it, did they live in the house for 2 years after the renovation and then they sold it? Or was the renovation like fresh and it was brand new, So when was the renovation done? What features did they use, right? There's like, go to Home Depot, look, like, you can buy tile for 99 cents a square foot. You can buy tile for $25 a square foot.
Right.
What was the quality of the finishes in the property? What did they use in this property to set the value, right? And that's a big deal. So you got to make sure that like you're looking at those materials. Like if you can get in these properties, better. If you can't, dial into the photos. Give that agent a shout. Like, hey, I noticed the property had wood floors. Can you tell me, were they wood? Or were they like an LVP product? Like what was that?
Yeah.
Or was it actual hardwood? And you'll find out like the details of that because it matters. And then you go, okay, in order for me to get to that mark, I've got to put in this level of flooring. I've got to put in granite countertops. I've got to put in quartz. I've got to put in, custom light fixtures. I've got to do this, this, and this to hit that ARV number. So, knowing those details is probably the most critical thing.
Yeah. And not to mention, you have to look at homes that was recently sold as well. Right. So, wow, Dan, you got to run comparable comps and you got to look at what you mentioned, size, location, and even features that or products that they added into the home. I'm a brand new investor listening to this podcast. Where do I find comps? Where can I find these things?
I know. Yeah. The data is hard to get. Like, if you're an investor and not an agent, and you don't have access to the MLS, you're kind of subject to looking at Zillow or Redfin or realtor.com or something like that. And you can find, data that you would find in an MLS there. You're not going to find all of the data there. So, either like hire a real estate agent to help you, like look deep into the MLS and see what they can dig up, or use a platform like ours that this is what we do is provide data to investors. What I say is like I want to eliminate the doubt for investors that there could be something missing. Like if I can give them every piece of data and show them every property and every comparable, and then they can work with my analyst team to nail like what the ARV actually is on the asset. I just feel like you can sleep at night knowing that versus like, I'm just randomly buying this property based on like what I think I can get for it in the future. Like I don't like that. So we try to make it very objective in that way. So I think that's the point. You gotta find good data. I mean, we've said that 100 times on the show. It's like, you just have to. It's out there. It's available. Like this used to be a crapshoot. It did. Like, it used to be. I remember like my dad would flip homes, and like they didn't have a digital MLS even at the time, right? And so he
felt good. They did it.
Well, that, and he relied on his real estate agent to say, hey, what do you think? Like if I build this and I have these finishes, what would it sell for? And now the agent's giving you some subjective information about like what they think they could sell it for. Yeah, and they probably got lucky a number of times and did it and they were fine. But I'm sure there was some losses in there too as a result of like just not having all the data. So the data's there. And in our environment, it's free. Use it. Like I'm paying for it for you, so go use it. Like,
because you also got to factor in trends, right? There's a lot of trends happening to each market. Seasonality comes to play. Are you in a declining market?
Right.
And by the way, flippers have to be prepared for if there's a new build in the area as well. How do you compare comps to that as well, right? So
you got to know what your end buyer is, right? I've got a friend that I do some flipping with, and what he and I like to do is we like to decide who we think our buyer is going to be. Like we've got this little townhome going on down the street, and we sat there and we said, okay, who's our most likely buyer here? And we went through a bunch of different profiles and we were like, nope, it's probably a single female that wants to live in this specific area, but doesn't necessarily have like $1 million to spend and move into a home here, wants to get an entry-level product. They probably don't have kids or anything yet, but they're like young enough, professional, they've got a job, like, cause this is the area for all of that. And we're going to build a home that's like safe. It's going to be secure. It's going to have finishes that avatar is going to like. We're going to add some technical things to the properties, not expensive stuff, but things that we know that avatar is going to like. And that's how we like to think about like where we're going. So think about who your buyer is going to be and profile that person. Put yourself in their shoes. Like, the flip that you're doing for a retiree is different than the flip you're doing for a first-time buyer.
Yeah.
Luxury flip, totally different thing, right? Like that you got to be more detailed. But
I love that. Love that. So, Dan, you mentioned compare comps.
Yeah.
What are the other? But in some cases, investors are the first to do the flip in that neighborhood. So there's no comps to compare to.
Yeah.
So are there adjustments that we can make to the ARV? How should we be thinking about that? So again, I'm the first to do it, this remodel of a kitchen. What adjustments should I make?
Yeah, I think, you can start to look at like your cost to do the renovation plus a certain margin, right? And so the kind of earmark that I've heard for that is like cost plus 15% is kind of what an investor wants to make on it, right? But be careful. Like you can over renovate a property. So like if you're the first one in, just make sure that you're not the first one in because the neighborhood just won't warrant it.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe there's something going on in that neighborhood that you're not going to get like high comps out of it. You're never going to be able to sell at a high watermark. Right. So be conscious of like your macro surroundings too. Just because like you're the first guy in and the house is cheap doesn't make it a great deal. It could just be that the house is cheap and it will forever be cheap, So like it's like we've got areas like that in here, like South Phoenix, right? Where, maybe south of the stadium, like you're not going to go down there. Like you can make some money renovating a property and putting it back on the market down there, but you're not going to like deck it out. You're not going to like go crazy because the person that wants to live in that home, they're most likely not able to afford some of those finish level things, right? So you might be overshooting by doing so.
Yeah.
So you got to be careful there.
Yeah. No, actually a good segue because you got a budget for your success, right?
Yeah.
Again, don't over renovate for the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And don't go too high end.
Yeah.
You got to understand your audience at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
Don't put in the luxury appliances and all of that because you won't get your money back.
Right.
Right.
No, but I think like, right now there's homes on the market. Like there was 2 years ago, you could flip a house and it could look like anything and it was going to sell.
Yeah.
Like that just was easy, to do. Now you still got to sell the property, right? And you got to put some finishes in it that are going to sell. What I like to think about is like, I want my property to be unique. Like I want that wow factor when people walk into the property, right? So one of the tricks I'll tell you guys that I've been doing now is like Amazon sells like a lighting package with an Alexa thing.
Yeah.
And what you do is, you set this thing up and for $700, you can have this whole thing dialed in.
Yeah.
You walk in the front door and, you set it up in advance, obviously. And you walk in the front door and all the lights turn on. And then if you have like shades that can roll up, the shades will roll up.
Yeah.
But now the house like welcomes you when you walk in the door. Like that right now has become my thing where like people are like, wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've already set the tone. Like think
that.
about when you're selling this property, right? When they walk through the front door, the National Association of Realtors has this statistic that every year they do a ton of stats. They said that the buyer decides of the home that they're going to buy within a second of walking in the front door.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, you do that. You don't even go in some.
Yeah.
Right? Like you drive up. And
I drive up and I'll just drive right off.
You just drive out. But they say within a second, like, will I live here or will I not? You might decide, like, get to the master bath and be like, it's too small. I just can't do it. This one isn't going to work.
Right.
But the yes or no of like, could I even do this deal? Happens within a second of walking in the front door.
Yeah.
So why not make that second really important?
There it
right?
is.
Like make them feel super important. Like I got that from like Vegas. Have you been to a Vegas casino recently? Stayed in a hotel?
Yeah.
Like Aria?
Yeah.
You go in, you walk in and it's like, welcome, Mr. Cruz.
Yeah, I love that.
And then the blinds go up, TV turns on, all that.
That.
Like that's the experience that I'm creating now on my flip properties. Awesome. And that is, it's working.
And it's budget friendly too.
It's $700. It's like, and then they're like, wow, this is a smart house.
I love that. Speaking of, budget friendly things, let's the adverse of that. budget pitfalls.
Yeah.
What are some of the things we can avoid? Because this thing could get out of hand really quick if you underestimate some pricing, or you forget about you own that home as well. So you're paying HOA, you're paying taxes and things like that.
Yep.
Are there any other budget pitfalls you
Yeah.
want to avoid when you're
For sure. Yeah. I think the big one's like structural changes. So, when you buy a flip property, like the ones I super interested in are the ones that need very minimal structural changes.
Okay.
Like if I've got to open up a kitchen, that's not a huge deal. But if I've got to take down 2 or 3 walls and reconfigure the floor plan, now I'm actually fundamentally changing this home.
Yeah.
Or I'm moving the location of the toilet. Like that sounds like nothing, but think about it. It's in concrete. It's got to be jackhammered out, and then I've got to replace it. Like saw cut the floor. That whole thing just starts to get really expensive. So, everybody likes to get like super HD TV on these things, and that's cool, but be careful. Like you can't just be tearing down walls without knowing what's behind the darn wall. Just be really careful, because I've seen it. People tear down walls. Next thing you know, they've torn down a load-bearing wall. And then now they've got to put up a beam to hold that wall. And they're like, well, I don't like the beam. I'd rather have a wall back. And now you're just like, you're running in circles. So just be super careful about making gigantic structural changes. Because unless you're a seasoned vet and you know how to do this, just be careful. Like that could eat up a budget so fast.
It can get very expensive. Don't be afraid to get a second opinion.
No.
Don't be afraid to hire an appraiser when you're doing this, right? And again, because you got to avoid underestimating what labor cost, forgetting about taxes, insurance, and utilities, by the way. And then finally, you got to factor in closing costs as well.
Yep.
So your rehab is bigger than what you could ever imagine. What about some cost-effective things that you can do that make a huge impact?
Yeah, I think right now, like fresh landscaping, those things are like, again, the person's walking up to the property, make this house inviting. Don't slack on that. Make sure that that works. Put in some nice modern finishes. I don't think there's anybody I've ever met that said, I want to buy a house and then I want to put all of my own stuff into it. That never happens. Who wants to do work after they bought something? It's like, if you bought a TV and then they were like, oh, by the way, you've got to put this piece of, you'd be like, no, I'll just buy the one that has it all done.
Exactly.
So that's, you got to make sure that it's got some modern finishes to it. Be careful about colors. Because you can go into these tile stores right now and there are patterns and all kinds of stuff. It's cool. Just make sure that pattern appeals to your subject audience, right?
I love that.
Target your audience at the point of renovation. So pick colors that are going to appeal to more people.
Yeah.
Don't, paint deep dark walls and stuff like that. That stuff is, it's going to be, you're going to find that less people like that, than others. But have some fun with it. Don't just make them beige or make them gray. That I see all the time too. And that's the other thing. It's oh, the buyers will tour it and they'll be like, well, Flipper did this one for sure.
Yeah.
Right. But if you do some cool stuff, things I've been doing recently is I told you about my little Amazon lighting kit, backsplashes. I've been having some more fun with the backsplashes. I mean, it's a small thing. If they really dislike my backsplash, I'll change it for them. But it's, I'm having fun with it. I'm putting some color on it. I'm making it, a little bit better and brighter. And, that's working well.
That's awesome. All right. We got the ARV down. We got the flip down. We got the curb appeal. We got the light package. Now I want to maximize the resale value, right? So once the flip is done, we got to sell fast.
Yeah.
Well, what are some tips? What are some winning strategies to get this done pretty quickly?
One, hire the right agent, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Make sure you've got an agent that knows the area and understands it, and is willing to put in some work to sell the house with you. So I think that's important. I love staging. I think that, property staging on a vacant property helps a ton. It helps people. Not everybody's as creative as you, especially if you're an investor. They're just not. They don't have the same thought. Otherwise, they'd be doing it themselves. This is not what they do. So assume that they don't know anything, and you've got to put in furniture in places where like I've had rooms that weren't like normal.
Right.
And I was like, well, if I throw some furniture in this room and show them what the vision is for the room, then it's going to help them visualize.
I love that. I love that.
So stage it if you can. Professional photography is like a must. At this point, that's almost like you got to have it. It's just like it's like a normal thing. So make sure professional photography, make sure the marketing's right with your agent, make sure the agent has got the marketing pieces dialed in. If you're doing a drone or something fun, like those are great, but just how is it going to be used? What are you guys going to do with it? Make sure you're maximizing the value of like the marketing pieces you're doing. And then price it right, because, just because you poured into it and you left your heart there doesn't mean it's worth more. Right? So you got to be really careful. Like there's nothing worse than overpricing a flip property and then having to reduce the price multiple times. Yeah. So come out of the gate at a price that you're willing to sell it at, and you will find that that's going to be a much better strategy than pricing too high and hoping that the buyer is going to come in. Like price it at the market, let the darn thing just sell, right? And then move on to the next one. Because, the 5 or 10 grand that you've overpriced it with is going to be the difference. People are like, I'm avoiding even looking at it because I think it's overpriced.
Yeah. Now, do you time your flips as well? Because we hear this is the best time to sell for various reasons, but are you that detailed where you're timing your flips?
For sure.
Oh, okay. Talk to us about that.
Especially on like my profile, right? So like I bought one yesterday that I, is in a neighborhood that the likely buyer is a retiree, right? It's a lock and leave type property.
Got it.
2-bedroom, 2-bath condo, kind of in my area where I live in Scottsdale. And, it's a very much like a patio style home. It could be easily locked and leaved. You're not going to raise a family in this property, right? That's just not what it's going to be. So for me, it's like, I'm going to turn and burn that asset quickly because I want to get it done by the time spring training is here and all of the people are in town looking at potential properties here. Like that's what I'm looking for. Whereas like if I'm looking at a family home, I probably am ready to put that on the market in the summer. They're probably more likely to move in the summer, so you got to be conscious of who your buyer is and when they're going to be in town and when they're potentially going to be moving. Not a lot of people like to move their kids in the middle of a school year.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yep.
And then again, I love what you said earlier about the small details make a big impact. So fresh landscaping, neutral paint, and then updated fixtures with the modern. So that was awesome. Yep. All right, Dan, let's go to a real life flip breakdown because I want folks to really understand and take this to heart. So the flip, purchase price, let's go with 150.
Okay.
Rehab costs, 40,000.
Okay.
Target ARV, 275.
Yep.
And then you want a final sales price at 280.
Yep.
The profit after closing is $55K.
Yep.
All right. What are some, there's some couple challenges that I want to throw in there. You had an unexpected foundation issue that cost you $5,000. The market slowed down, right? And took an extra 2 months to sell. Those things are real life things that happen, right? So
for sure.
Yeah. Anything other than that can you talk about or add to that real life flip scenario?
Yeah, I think, factoring everything in, including like your closing costs, commissions that you're going to pay on the sale, holding costs, like, how long am I going to hold this thing? How much insurance am I going to have on that? What about like if I've got some debt, what does my debt service look like? How much am I going to pay in this money? Put it all in, right? Put it all in. That's the beauty of like our software is it allows a buyer to see the whole picture.
Yeah.
Like, I could always say like, here's the gross numbers. Like what you just gave me is what we would call a gross number.
Right.
I like to get it all the way down to the net. Like I want to know net, like what's my risk?
Yep.
And if that number now, that 55 you gave me is now 30, okay, like 30, I would probably still consider the deal, but is there any other risk I should consider?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Could I run into this or that? If there is, I build it in what I call a contingency. So I'll say if like renovation goes up by 10%, do I get 10% more for the property? If the answer is no, then I'm not doing that deal.
Ooh.
If the renovation could stay within 10% and I do get the bump as a result, great. if like I end up holding it for longer,
Right.
right? Stuff like that. I mean, hard to factor or see into the future, but you can tell a market and see what's going on. I think then you got to build in those contingencies to go, okay, 10% either way, am I still good on this deal? If the answer is yes, I'll move forward. If the answer is no, and my risk tolerance is pretty low, I'm not doing that, right? But if I got options, I'm not going to do that deal, So don't reach, do a deal that you're comfortable with and make sure that you've like checked it all the way down to the net, and then do a full risk assessment. With us, we've give you that advisor to be able to do that with, and walk you through the whole thing. And now you can sit down and go, okay, but is this too risky for me?
Yeah.
Or is it not? And that's a decision that we can't make for you, because real estate investing is a risk. It's just like buying a stock or buying anything else. Like it comes with a layer of risk. Nothing is easy. Yeah. So just make sure that you do your homework, and you got to set yourself up the best you possibly can.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But, I'll close with, I love this podcast.
Yeah.
Because, man, and I love what we do at Easy Street, because I always get to brag about how we help people and how we help people for free. But this episode particularly, I just love it because, again, ARV is the flipping foundation, right? You got to nail that. Do not guess. Use data, get second opinion, ensure that you have accurate comps is what we heard you say today, and understand your market. That is huge because you can be in a declining market. And then budget wisely. Put the money where it counts, not where it doesn't, right?
That's it, man.
Hey.
That's the game.
That's it.
That's it. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Behind the Doors. We hope you found today's insights valuable for your real estate investing journey.
Remember, real estate success doesn't happen overnight, but with the right tools and strategies, you can build long-term wealth and create passive income.
If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with others who are passionate about real estate investing.
Don't forget to follow us on social media for more tips and exclusive content.
Until next time, keep unlocking new opportunities, and we'll see you on the next episode of Behind the Doors.